Probably don't need to introduce myself, because if you did attend the keynote, I was the keynote speaker this morning. So I'm Pete. There's my contact information. And when I was keynoting, I could have sworn I put the contact information in the PowerPoint deck, but I didn't. So here it is. And I share that with you so that as you travel this journey, if there's anything that you come across that you'd like to ask me, or if you want to learn more about something, or if there's a resource or a PowerPoint or something that you want, you can go ahead and hook me up. Or hit me up and I'll help you out with that. Or if you head out towards Glacier National Park, which is really close to where I live, give me a holler, and I'd be happy to go out there with you. Wolves, bears, moose, mountain goats, I mean, you name it, some squatters. There's all sorts of stuff. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. So summer, winter, you name it. It's a good place to visit. So that information is out there for you. Also, I do want to share these with you. I kind of skimmed through this morning because it wasn't a sales pitch this morning. This afternoon, not that this is a sales pitch now, I do want to share with you the suite of resources that my co-author, Elisa Cimarral, and I have put together around this topic. So we started with a book that was intended for instructional coaches and instructional leaders to get started. It's called Building Teachers' Capacity for Success. That was about 10 years ago. Then we realized that teachers needed something in their hands, so we wrote the book Teach, Reflect, Learn that was intended specifically for a teacher audience, so our teachers could take the reins of their own professional learning. Then we realized, hey, principals and leaders need to be building their own capacity as well, so we wrote the Principal Influence with a team of authors. There's a video, and I think I might have a clip of that later. And this is our newest book, Creating a Culture of Reflective Practice, which is really what we're going to be taking content from today. And it really is the updated version of how do we build capacity in others, and how do we create an environment that really is rich for reflective dialogue and for instructional coaching and positive feedback. And then there's a little quick reference guide. You know how you all got that quick reference guide for the trauma-invested practice? Which is totally cool. Didn't know that was happening. We also put one together for reflective practice that's available at the ascd.org website. So that's as much of a sales pitch I'm going to give you. And I only tell you that to let you know that we've tried to create a comprehensive array of resources that address every position in education to provide support in this big idea. Okay? So you know who I am. Who are you? Who's in the room? Who are the principals in the room? Oh my goodness, lots of principals in there. How about assistant principals? Other duties as assigned, right? I was actually going to write a book called Other Duties as Assigned, Guidance or Guidelines for Assistant Principals, and then somebody already wrote a book with that same title. It's got different stuff, so I missed my window. District level administrators. Excellent, good. Any aspiring administrators, folks that haven't got an administrative position yet, but you're interested? Excellent, welcome aboard. And who am I missing? Do we have classroom teachers? Okay. School psychs? Welcome aboard. Anybody else? Behavior people? Behavior problems?
Behavior, well,
I'm just looking at you specifically.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, many people would say so. Organizational behavior management.
Excellent. Okay, great. Good. Well, to all of you, welcome. Glad you're here. We're going to do some fun stuff today. And this is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to chorally read our learning target. So here we go. On 3, everybody. 1, 2, 3. All right, you guys did a relatively decent job of choral reading. And there's one word in particular in that learning target I want to draw your attention to that I think is really, really important. What do you suppose that might be? Okay, so intentional. What else? Differentiate, okay. Coaching, yeah. Okay, maybe there's lots. I wanted to pay attention to this one. Match. I think match is the one, because if what we're doing as leaders isn't matching what our teachers and our staff need from us, well then why are we doing it? Right? Same thing that we could ask any teacher in a classroom, if what you're doing is not matching your students' needs, why are you doing it? Right? So we want to make sure that we're really intentional, really connected to the purpose behind everything we're doing and what our teachers are ready for and what our teachers need in any given moment. Okay, so I shared with you this tool this morning, the reflective cycle. You can't see the text on that one probably, but we do have one for administrators too. And I'm going to say principals, and most of the time we're talking about principals, assistant principals, aspiring principals, and those who supervise principals. So that envelops most of us in the room. And if we have leadership responsibilities in which we're tasked with building other people's capacity, that goes under that umbrella as well. So there is a reflective cycle for principal that's it's kind of a neat way of looking at the work we do, kind of a global picture. So I'll just walk you through just real quick. In the top right quadrant is our awareness quadrant. So we would need to build awareness of our leadership reality. So the posing question that's up there, how aware am I of the status of learning and teaching in my school, our current reality and needs, and my leadership role? That's a good question to start with. From the base of that circular staircase is what's really going on here and what's my role in all this? Second quadrant down the bottom right is now we're starting to think and act with intentionality. And the question is, how intentionally do I align decisions, actions, policies, and resources to meet our needs? So am I doing things on purpose that really shuttle us into a certain direction? Third question, this is where a lot of us fall apart, because a lot of us can say, okay, I know what's going on, and I know what I'm doing. And a lot of us kind of fall apart with our leadership when it's time to assess the impact of what we've done. So how do I know if what I'm doing has any impact? How do I know whether my leadership actions are positively impacting the staff and school community? Okay? And then as a follow-up question, how responsive am I to the results of my assessment and the changing needs of our school community? And that's just kind of the big idea of that reflective cycle, is we process and walk ourselves through that, that reflective cycle. All right? Okay, so I'm going to operate under two assumptions for the rest of our session today, and you just let me know if it works out okay, if this is agreeable. Assumption number one is that the classroom is our mecca. It is the place where the magic happens. It's not the office, not the hallway, not the cafeteria. Everything we need to do has to impact what happens at the classroom level. That's number one. And then number two is what we ought to be doing in schools really is focusing on what can we do, what impact can we have to improve the quality of teaching and learning at the classroom level. And if you're okay with those two assumptions, we'll just get on with it. Anybody have any questions or dispute about either of those assumptions? Because you know what they say about assuming, right? I think the expression goes, don't assume, it's a bad idea. Or something like, I don't know exact words, but it's something like that. All right, so we're good? Okay, let's do this. As leaders, we have the challenge to get beyond the 3 B's, right? Y'all know the 3 B's in leadership? Budgets, buildings, and buses. And for so long, so many of us were, our role models really were focused on managing the plant, right? And just making sure that it ran okay, that the buses were on time, that people were where they were supposed to be, nothing was on fire. And as long as that was okay, whatever happened teaching and learning-wise, that's on the teachers and that's their responsibility. Well, now we know better that we can engage in instructional leadership. And there are behaviors that we can engage in that will actually change the way our teachers teach and change the way our kids learn, even from the office level. So we want to make sure that we dig into that. And so in some research that we've done, we kind of created a tool that's, well, this criterion 2 of this tool is called Instructional Leadership. So this is our big idea, and this is closely related to the learning target that you read just a second ago. That our responsibility is really to build leadership capacity in others and help others to be as good as they can possibly be at whatever they're doing. All right. I'll ask you just to read this quote. Can you all see the screen okay? I want you to read this quote and see if there's any words or phrases or anything in there that kind of jumps out at you and resonates with you. If there's anything that catches your attention in there that resonates with you, just share it aloud. Let's hear it. Individualized, okay? Appreciate, sure. I don't mean to get in front of you. I'm just weaving through. What else catches your attention there? Robotically, yeah. I mean, how many times have we done one size fits all, just kind of, we're just going through the motions of faculty meetings and professional development sessions and just doing it, right? What was the other? Educational malpractice. How often do we use that phrase, right? There are codes of ethics that other professions have to sign and adhere to and educate. We don't really have one. Gifts, right. Anybody notice the word nary? I mean, how often do you see the word nary? We were just talking about how fun we can play with the language back there, right? Nary, that's a great word. I don't think we use the word nary enough. So there it is. Okay. Well, I mentioned this before, too, the idea of being able to go in a classroom and tell a teacher what to do differently, and they would do that differently until I left the room, right? And that's a reality that we face. And so often in our work, we're in that position where what we see is that's not good enough, and you got to do it better. And our immediate kind of knee-jerk reaction is, I'm just going to tell you how to do it differently. I'm just going to tell you how to do it better. Do this instead. And that might work sometimes for some people. And that's actually the kiss of death for us as leaders, because if it works sometimes for some people, we then start to internalize it and start to believe that strategy might work for everybody every time. And then we kind of use that strategy and overuse that strategy. Well, we want to get to the point where we're seeing beyond what's happening right in front of our eyes. Because would you believe there's stuff under the surface that's going on? Because you can go in a classroom, you can observe what a teacher's doing. You can listen to what a teacher's saying. You can observe what the kids are doing. You can listen to what the kids are saying. And still there's more to that, right? So what are the things that are underneath the surface? What would you think they would be? Okay, the home environment of the kids, the backgrounds, the experiences that they have, baggage even, sure. Teachers don't have lives. Teachers all sleep at the school. They do grocery shopping in the cafeteria. Yeah. Have you ever seen a kid outside of school and they're like, what are you doing here? You're like, I am hungry. Yeah. It happens. Okay, so the values of the people involved, sure. What other things are? Like what? Yeah, illnesses and how you feel. Have you ever had a day that you come to work and you're like, I feel great. Today's going to be a great day. And have you ever had a day where you come to work and like, God, I should have called in sick. Right? Well, that affects the way a classroom is run during the day. And you believe teachers have the same experiences, right? That matters. Okay, what else? Bless you.
An undercurrent of culture like that, that peer pressure for especially new teachers and veterans looking at the new ones, et cetera.
Yeah, but there's
Underground culture.
Sure. The culture of the school and the relationships. And if I'm a principal and I walk into a teacher's classroom, do you think that teacher might start doing things differently just because the principal came in the room? I don't want to say dog and pony show, but I think I just did. Every once in a while you might see one as you go in a classroom. And that's real also. Until we've established this culture that when I come in the classroom, and this is what I honestly told my teachers, when I come in the classroom as your principal, I'm the least important person in the room. Because you've got kids in there, they are the most important person in the room. As soon as I come in the room, please don't do anything differently. Unless you're doing something terrible, right? I want to see teaching and learning in the wild so I can give you feedback on what's actually happening and we can have some honest conversation about it. So just go on about the teaching and learning business and I'll be here to help you as best I can. All right. I am going to share with you a couple tools that we're going to use this afternoon to kind of help make sense of some of this information as we get into it. Would you all believe, because we talked about reflection this morning, and the art of self-reflection and that process of going through the reflective cycle, would you all believe that everybody reflects a little bit differently? That we don't all reflect the same? Okay, so a second tool that we created is called the Continuum of SelfReflection that describes the differences in how folks reflect. And rather than have me share that with you, I'm going to play a video I found on YouTube that will introduce the tool, and then we'll talk about the tool afterwards, and then we'll practice using the tool after that. So here is the Continuum of SelfReflection. Here we go. So we've created a tool to describe the differences in the way that teachers reflect on their professional practice. It's called the Continuum of SelfReflection. And I want to introduce this tool to you using a metaphor. So get ready. Raise your hand right now in the room if you are aware that there is a direct medical link between toothpaste and weight loss. Clearly, I can't see around the room to see whose hands are up, so I'm going to guess that not very many hands are up. Now that puts us squarely into what we call the unaware stage. That just means we don't know something. We haven't been taught it, we haven't learned it, we haven't been exposed to it, and there's no value associated with being in the unaware stage. That just means we don't know something, and it's perfectly okay to not know something. All right, so now you trust me. You believe that what I'm going to tell you is true. And in the last several years, there have been multiple
research studies published in medical research journals indicating a strong and direct medical link between toothpaste and weight loss. Some of it totally makes sense. If you brush your teeth after you eat, then you're less likely to snack between meals. You're less likely to crave those sugary sweet desserts. So you're going to reduce your caloric intake, and it would make sense that you would lose some weight. But there's another piece to the puzzle that's pretty fascinating. They have identified an enzyme in the toothpaste that actually sends a message to your brain that says, we're done eating. Now, what your brain does with that message is the cool part, because you could have sent the same message by pushing your plate away from you. Your brain sends the message to your body that says, all right, y'all can start processing your food now. So in a sense, you start quickening up your metabolism by brushing your teeth immediately after you eat. Armed with this information, you might stop at the pharmacy on the way home tonight and pick up one of those travel-sized toothbrushes that you bring to work and try to brush your teeth a little bit more frequently while you're there. Now, how long do you suppose that's going to last? I know you're thinking about your New Year's resolution. Give it about 2 weeks, right? So you've entered what we call the conscious stage on the continuum of self-reflection. The conscious stage is characterized by a knowing-doing gap, where you know that there's a practice you should be utilizing that would help you lead to a happier, more fulfilling lifestyle, for instance, but you don't implement that with consistency and intentionality. Those are two big ideas, consistency and intentionality. This is the conscious stage on the continuum of self-reflection. So a couple months down the road, you go to your doctor for your annual physical exam, and your doc says, I'm a little bit concerned about you. You're carrying around a couple extra pounds, and we need to do something to get you back on the healthy train. So you think back to this video and you think, all right, well, maybe it's toothbrushing. So you go and you stop at the pharmacy, and this time you don't pick up one, but you pick up 6 of those pocket toothbrushes, and you're brushing your teeth all the time. You got them in your glove box, your desk, your office, and they start calling you Mr. or Mrs. Colgate, and life is good, right? You've hit what we call the action stage. And in the action stage, you are committing your brain power to changing the outcomes. The results that you're getting are not good enough, and you're going to do something about it. Now, as time goes by and you're brushing your teeth all the time, you start to realize, hey, it's working. Your pants are a little bit looser, you're starting to feel a little bit better. Then you start wondering, well, what else could I be doing? It can't just be toothbrushing, right? So you think about diet, you think about exercise, you try the spin class, that's not very comfortable, so then you go with a yoga class, and that's cool, that works for you. And then the diet thing, try the South Beach diet, that's not really your style, so maybe North Beach for a little bit, I don't know, mix it up. What you're basically doing at this point is filling your tool belt with tools, and you are thinking about which tool is the right one to meet your needs and to help you progress towards your goal. This is what we call the refinement stage on the continuum of self-reflection. Altogether, these 4 stages comprise this entire continuum of self-reflection: the unaware stage, the conscious stage, the action stage, and the refinement stage. I'm going to describe it for you in a little bit more detail now.
Which you can find on the internet these days, huh? That's just found on YouTube, I don't know. So that's our introduction to the tool. The tool's comprised of these 4 stages. So unaware, conscious, action, refinement. And the important thing for us to remember as we look at this and we think about the folks with whom we work is that this is not an evaluative tool at all. This is a descriptive tool. What we're trying to do is identify the patterns of reflective behavior that our teachers have and that our folks have so that we can support them in growing as reflective practitioners and moving along this continuum. All right? So we're going to do that in the context of whatever our teachers want to work on, whatever they're passionate about, whatever their point B is that they're interested in reaching, we are going to be there to help them think their way along that continuum and along that process to get to that point B. Okay, so here's basically the way the tool's laid out. First thing you'll notice at the very top is going to be the name of the stages. Remember, there's 4 stages: unaware, conscious, action, refinement. Within that name, there is a capacity building goal. This is an important concept. This capacity building goal is basically the teacher's next step. So if a teacher's working at this stage, the unaware stage, their capacity building goal is to build deeper awareness of student needs, content, and pedagogy. It makes sense, doesn't it? If you're not aware, then you want to build awareness. Okay, and each stage has a similarly obvious capacity building goal. On the far left, and this is where we're going to focus our attention first, are the teacher's reflective tendencies. So these are the reflective behaviors that a teacher at this stage tends to demonstrate. So these are their reflective habits. And at the very bottom is going to be a very key indicator. So when you get this and you're looking at it with your table mates, I want you to look very closely at the bottom bullet in that first column on each of the 4 pages. The rest of the tool, so kind of like the Texas 2-step, the rest of the tool is all about strategy development for us as capacity builders. What can we do to help a teacher that reflects in this way to move along the continuum and move themselves forward? Okay, big idea, good? Everybody okay with that? Any questions before I hand you out the tools? Yes, ma'am. It's posted online now? That was immediate. That's the way I operate. I want you to know, telepathically, sent it, and boom, you're welcome. So if you go to the IEPRC website, you can find that on the conference handouts. Okay? And I'm still going to pass you out paper copies. Everybody be cool. All right. Here we go. So this is for your table. This is for your table to share. I told you it's forced collaboration, so y'all are going to have to look through this together, and you're going to love it, and you're going to love each other at the end, because you won't be able to help it. Here you go. There you go, young lady. This is what I was telling you guys about. This is your opportunity now to force collaboration in the setting back here. So one for you, and I'm going to give one to you. So there's 3 places you can kind of gravitate towards to kind of look over each other's shoulders to look through that, unless you can access them online. Fair enough? Best I could do for right now. Okay. Okay, so as you have your tools in front of you and you're poking around, here's what I'm going to ask you to do first. I want you to look at just the first column in each of the 4 pages, in each of the 4 stages, so that you can see the progression of reflective ability. So how do our teachers' reflective abilities evolve and grow from stage to stage along the tool? So from unaware to conscious to action to refinement, what do you see as changing? What's different? How do our teachers reflect differently along the stages? And I want you to look at the very top to the capacity building goals to see what you notice about those capacity building goals. All right, so take a couple minutes to just kind of orient yourself to the tool and see if it makes sense to you as you look through it together. All right, team, let's bring it back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that's my people. That's my people today. All right. So what are some things you noticed as you look through that? First time with this tool, right? So most of you, at least. So what are some things you noticed? What caught your attention just in that first column? That was the question that I didn't yet ask, but I knew it was coming. Did those sound familiar, right? I mean, do you know a teacher who's operating in the unaware stage? Could you put a name next to it? And that's perfectly natural, and that's perfectly okay. It's our tendency to kind of go to that place to make sense of it, right? So good, that's great. Good. What else did you notice? Yeah, and that's exactly why we built this tool, because of the philosophy of you can name it, you can tame it, right? So as soon as you can define it, describe it, say, okay, this is what it is, then, okay, now I know what to do with it. And we intentionally built the strategies, which you haven't looked at yet, right? That will help us to figure out what's our game plan then. How do we do that? How do we help teachers move along? But we're going to get to that in a minute. Okay, what else did you notice just in that first column still? You guys are not off the hook just because you sit in the front. You get a free pass for some of it, but not the whole thing. Did y'all see the last bullets that I pointed out to you? Okay, so let's go through those last bullets. First stage, unaware stage. What's that last bullet? Job itself, the act of teaching. Now, in the big scheme of things, if you look through those other bullets that are on that stage, this is somebody who comes to work every day and just gets the job done. Clocks in, clocks out. I got a list of things I got to get done. This is what teachers do. I'm doing these things without truly allocating a significant amount of his or her mental energy towards, why am I doing this? How could I do this better? What am I trying to accomplish? It's just getting it done. And you know what? We have all been there. So before we start casting value judgments into this equation, because remember, this is non-evaluative, it's non-judgmental, it's just descriptive. Let's remember the first time you taught 3rd grade. I never taught 3rd grade before. I didn't know what to do. So I was just in there. Thank goodness I had a teacher's manual. I'm going to follow the teacher's manual, and I'm just going to do this. And that happens. Sometimes when you change your curriculum, when you change your teaching assignment, when you change the class period that you have prep, I mean, all those things can throw you for a loop so that it's new. You get a new principal in the building. You get a new group of students in your classroom. You're starting from scratch a lot of the times. So it's not unusual for us to find ourselves in that unaware stage, at least not temporarily. And we had the conversation up at the front table. It's okay if you're at the unaware stage. I mean, you can rent a house there for a couple days, and that's going to be all right. You just don't want to make that your permanent residence, right? So that's all right. Okay, what about conscious? What was that last bullet in the conscious stage? Focuses on self, right? And did that make sense as you look through the other bullets? Remember the video I showed you this morning of my reflective friend in Delaware, Justin? And there was that moment where he says, you know what? You're awesome, right? That was all about him. It worked for him. And so you're focusing on, how am I teaching? Am I using the right strategies? Am I using enough wait time? It's all about me. And then the difference as you go from all about me to the next stage, the action stage, is what? Yeah, the science. We want to make sure that we're doing this right and meeting our kids' needs a little bit, right? And then what's the refinement stage, last bullet? The art. That's where we know that there's a great strategy that we're just not going to use anymore. So go back to action for a second. Y'all remember when Bobby Marzano's first book came out, Classroom Instruction That Works? And it was the list, I call him Bobby. There's the list of the highest impact instructional strategies based on the research, right? And do you remember what number 1 was on that list? With the greatest impact? Identifying similarities and differences, right? So when that first book came out, do you know what teachers across the country were doing like crazy? You remember the Venn diagram explosion of 1999? Everybody was doing Venn diagram. Every lesson, it didn't even matter if the lesson, it was totally inappropriate to have a Venn diagram. I'm going to have it because Bobby Marzano says it's going to work, right? And when that's, yeah, we're going to check to make sure you're using Venn diagrams. So help me. So principal walk in the room, teacher's like, okay, boys and girls, let's get out our Venn. Like, that's not what we're doing. So that's the action stage. That's the science part. When you get to the refinement stage is when you realize, oh, the Venn diagram is an inappropriate strategy for this learning target with this group of kids right now in this moment. And it takes us that development to get to the point where we understand and realize those things. Okay? So there's your tool. And I want to give us the opportunity now to practice with both steps of the two-step tango, or whatever I called it before, Texas two-step, to identify and then provide the support for our teachers. So I'm going to give you the scenario of Chris, and you have a couple of tasks to do with Chris. Just like before, I've got a copy of the Chris scenario for each table. Forced collaboration, round 2. What I'm going to ask you to do is pick a reader, and one of you read the Chris scenario to your table mates. And then together, your task is to identify at which stage on the continuum of self-reflection is Chris currently operating, and why. Okay, team, let's bring it together in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and whoosh. All right. Okay, so what do you think about Chris? Where on the continuum of self-reflection might we find him, and why? Or let me rephrase. Where on the continuum of self-reflection is Chris currently operating, and why? What do you think? There are no wrong answers. It's all hypothesizing. Guess and check. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. I'm just kidding. So between two stages, do you think it's possible for people to have characteristics of more than one stage? Yes. Simultaneously? Apparently. Yeah. Okay. Well, then we're okay with that. Okay. So which two stages and why? The first and the second. Okay, let's use the academic vocabulary, please. Okay. So, I was going to use colors. Yeah, the red stage and the gold stage. Yeah. So he's orange. Okay, yeah, okay, I like the way you did that. Okay, so why? That's the big question, is why? Why do we feel that way? Yes. Can you cite some text evidence for me, please? See what I'm doing here? I'm totally messing with her.
Yeah. He focuses on the job. He's done it for 15 years. He knows how to do it, but he doesn't necessarily reflect on what he should be doing to get engagement.
Okay, so that's the unaware element, is he's just getting the job done.
Just getting it done.
Okay.
Not a lot of collaboration.
Okay, not a lot of collaboration with his colleagues. He didn't have time for that. Ain't nobody got time for collaboration. Okay.
When prompted by the principal on
Okay.
set a learning goal, he is somewhat aware there's an issue with engagement. It's not his fault, obviously, but
Yeah.
yeah, he's done this.
Yeah.
I think it's all about him. It's about
Stop
we,
reading
it's about the you.
Okay, it's all about him.
He has to operate with strong habits and helpful practices.
Strong habits. He certainly has his way of doing business, doesn't he? Okay. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so when prompted to reflect, here's the question. Is he capable of engaging in reflection that maybe accurately conveys, at least to a certain extent, what's going on in his reality, in his classroom. I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? Is whether he's capable of engaging in that reflective behavior.
Capable. I mean, he's gone to PD. It's just he needs to learn how to apply that.
Yeah.
Not quite at the action stage.
Right.
Not quite at the action stage. He maybe has, would you believe there's a knowing-doing gap at play? Like he knows some things. He obviously, and I think it even talks about he's got an arsenal of skills, right? He's got a tool belt full of tools. And he even, I love this expression. Isn't this great? The teaching, he has realized, takes care of itself. What? So that's strong habits, comfortable practices is really what we're talking about. So when you say he's focused on the job itself, I would agree that he's just got some stuff that he's just got to do through the day. I think the teaching part of it, he's got enough skills that he can just kind of wing it and survive. He's not unaware of teaching strategies. He's aware of teaching strategies, but he's not using teaching strategies intentionally just yet. Okay. So with that information, I would kind of agree that he's got some unaware characteristics and he's got some conscious characteristics, and I would lead us towards what we refer to as the preponderance of evidence. So basically, if you had a highlighter and you were to look through the unaware stage and highlight the characteristics that describe him and then do the same thing in the conscious stage, he'd probably have a few more highlighted in the conscious than in action. So I would tend to lean towards conscious when we think of defining the stage. And the only reason we do that is so that we have an action plan as capacity builders. It's not the, and you remember how I rephrased my question? The stage at which he is currently operating. The assumption is that he's going to grow, that he's going to move. We got the growth mindset at play, that we expect him to be ushered along this continuum. We are not statically, categorically defining him as conscious stage teacher, end of story. Okay, and that's really, really important for us to acknowledge. So right now, he's operating in the conscious stage. And what's the capacity building goal for a teacher in the conscious stage like Chris? What's that say up there at the top of our gold page? Somebody in a big voice, read that out for us. So the big idea there is we want Chris to come to work and do things on purpose, right? Quit winging it. If you've got skills, match them to what your kids need, match them to the lesson, match them to the learning targets, and use those skills in the right moments for the right reasons, right? Be on purpose. Plan it. I know. He's tired. He's got a lot going on. And what does it say in that first column, conscious stage, about those things? Tired, baby, lots going on. Yes. Offers external explanations. We refer to that as the Han Solo, right? Because didn't Han Solo always say, it's not my fault? Right? Same thing. Not his fault. It's the outside world is creating this environment in which this is what he has to do. I'm just so busy, there's no possible way I could do that. And okay, just a quick side story. My co-author, Elisa, and I, in our first iteration of this tool, we actually used the word makes excuses. That was actually in the first tool, in the book, Building Teachers' Capacity for Success. And then we realized, as soon as we used the term makes excuses, what have we done to the conversation? Yeah, we just shut it down, didn't we? We're not going to have a conversation. It's combative now. But if we're trying to get in that person's head and understand what they're thinking and how they're reflecting on their practice, and we see that, oh, this person doesn't see him or herself, in Chris' case, him, he doesn't see himself as the X factor that changes the engagement, that changes kids' outcomes, that changes success rates. He sees it as the outside world is determining that. That's a fantastic bit of information for us to help him to realize, no, dude, what you do in the classroom matters. It's not just out there. It's not just what happens at home. Okay? So that's an important thing for us to realize. So that's why we use the term offers external explanations. It's a little bit more a conversation opening as opposed to conversation shutting. All right? And then if you look at that second column, we haven't done this yet, but look at the strategies for how we support Chris as a teacher. That second column asks us for the roles that an administrator and or an instructional coach or a department chair or somebody like that might play. What is the role an administrator would play to support Chris? Navigator. What's a navigator do? Okay, so steers the ship, right? The navigator steers the ship and plots out the course. If I'm Chris's principal and I go want to talk to Chris, what do I want to talk about? Based on what you just read, what is it that the principal wants to talk to Chris about when we sit down and have a conversation? Being intentional in his work And what's the context in which we want him to be on purpose in particular? What really kind of shown as the key focus?
Let them know that we want to support them.
Yep, that we're here to support him, and we want him to be intentional in what he does. Intentionally doing what? Teaching's kind of a big, broad concept, so let's whittle that down a little bit. Was there an element of his teaching that seemed to be a focus in there? Okay, yeah, let's go with engagement. How are you engaging your kids? I want to talk to him about how are you intentionally engaging your kids in the class. What does Chris want to talk about when I go talk to him?
The external factors.
Everything out there, right? And so as a navigator, I'm going to steer the conversation back to what are you doing to engage your kids? And he'll say, oh, I got these kids that are in special ed. Okay, what are you doing to engage them? Oh, I got these kids that speak a different language at home. What are you doing to engage them? Oh, I got these kids that are behavior problems. And what are you doing to engage them? Does that make sense? And then the other role, what's the coach's role? Couldn't everyone use a motivator strategist? I mean, think about that for a second. What does a motivator strategist do? Motivates and strategizes. Thank you for using the terms to define the terms. Yeah. If you were typing that in Excel, it would say error does not compute. Okay, so a motivator strategist is the person that says, you can do this, right? You got this. Come on, man. Come on, let's plan it. And the strategist part says, I will sit down with you and we will plan together. We will do this together. I will help you plan the engagement strategies. I will model it for you. You got this. Come on, man. Right? So that's exactly what Chris needs. And when we talk about motivator strategists, by the way, when we talk about instructional coach, I use the term instructional coach to cover all those non-evaluative peer relationships that the teachers have in their buildings. So it could be a department chair, could be a mentor, could be an actual instructional coach, could be a division lead, could be whatever that position looks like. So that's what I'm talking about. So when you look at that and you start to think about it, because these roles were intentionally put together so that administrator and coach work complementarily, that's an actual word, to support Chris no matter what. We kind of wrap our arms around him and say, this is what Chris needs. He needs someone to keep him on track, and he needs someone to say, you got this, and I will sit down and plan with you. Because left to his own devices, is Chris going to plan? No. And left to his own devices, is he going to funnel his own thoughts towards what do I really want to accomplish? No. So he needs both of those influences. Okay, so far so good? All right. Now we're going to play a little game because it's after lunch. You've been sitting down for a little bit, and that's enough of that. So we're going to do a little activity. It's called Mix and Mingle. Have you ever done a Mix and Mingle before? It's where you stand up, you find somebody that you don't know, and the two of you get together and you have a conversation. So in order for this to work, one of each of the two of you is going to need to have a copy of your handout packet for the conscious stage. Chris's stage. I would like us to stay there as best as we can. So if you have an electronic version, as you're mixing and mingling to find somebody, just hold up your device. And if you have a paper version, you hold up your paper. And ideally, people that don't have either could find someone that has one, and the two of you could get together and you could have the next conversation. All right? And if it happens that two people that have devices or handouts get together, that's great too. All right, so here's what we're going to do. You're going to look next at the third column. And the third column is the Strategic PLC and Teacher Leadership Support column. And that's full of strategies that we could use to have Chris's teammates provide support for him. Because you know how this is a tough job anyway. And if you're left to your own devices and you're all on your own, it's an even harder job. So if you have teammates that can rally or circle the wagons and provide support for you, that would be outstanding. So these are some ways that you could do that. What I'm going to ask you to do, you and your partner, is get together, look at the strategies in that column in the conscious stage page, and imagine if Chris were one of yours, what are some things in that list that you think might help build him as a reflective practitioner? That's all you have to do is play a little game of connect the dots, look at the strategies, look at the capacity building goal, understand the context of Chris, and say, oh man, could we use this? How would this help Chris? And the two of you kind of bantered about for 2-3 minutes, see if you can figure out 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 strategies that would really help Chris. Fair enough? The only requirement is that the person you stand and talk to is not someone that's sitting at your current table, because you've already had some conversations there, and it's great that you can meet other people. So when you stand up, find someone else, meet them, say hello, and then talk about Chris using the center. Just stay in the center column for right now, please, and I'll give you the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 whoosh when it's time to move on. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring it back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and...
I was a little early.
Yeah, I like your whooshing. You're a good whoosher. Thank you. Okay. Did you and your partner find a strategy that you think would really do well for helping Chris with his teammates? What do you think? Yes, sir. Okay, so you mentioned a really important part about data that we need to make sure that we're clear on. It's not just looking at the data, it's asking the good questions. So making sure that we're asking the right questions as we're analyzing those data. Can you think of a question or two that would be the right question or a good question to really prompt Chris's thinking to have him make that connection between what he did and how his kids performed?
What worked well in your lesson? What went well?
Okay. So what does that question do?
It makes him think back to his teaching and how the kids responded or how they reacted towards the lesson.
Yes, and isn't that one of the things that we want Chris to start to realize? What I did impacts something, right? So my actions, the kids responded to my actions in this way. So we're starting to draw that cause and effect. And that's really whatever questions we can come up with to help the teachers process their data. We want him to see the cause and effect of I did this and my kids responded this way. And also, we want his teachers to be able to say, and I taught it this way and I got these results. And start to see some of the differences. And oh, I could have taught it that way and maybe I could get those results as well. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. And that'll work too for Chris because Chris is so keen to what he's doing in his classroom that that'll help him really focus on doing something on purpose to accomplish a certain end. Yes.
Partner also suggested putting him around people that will help him get to that next step to
Aha.
support that learning as well.
Did you notice the last bullet in that column? What does that say? Strategically partner him with a teacher who's operating in what stage? Refinement. Now there's a reason for that, and as we go through and we think that, oh, what's up on the screen is not accurate.
Oh, okay, good.
That's
Okay,
the
I was like, good.
that's the unaware stage stuff with the conscious stage heading. So don't look at that. So if you were using that, I'm sorry, my bad. I probably should have told you that. We want to connect him with a teacher who's operating in the refinement stage, so that that teacher in the refinement stage does think-alouds, professional think-alouds, to let Chris know exactly how a highly reflective teacher thinks and reflects on his or her practice. We want Chris to know what he is capable of at some point down the road. Yes. Good. Were there others? Any others that you really wanted to draw out? Oh, you guys said the same exact word. Jinx, you want me a Coke? 2 Cokes.
We talked about surrounding.
Yes. Fantastic. And common planning. Is there anything better to really reinforce the fact that Chris needs to actually sit down and do some lesson planning than to have the whole team sit down and say, hey, we're lesson planning? And Chris will do that. He'll be there for those lesson planning. And then he'll go to the bar. He's working at the bar. Okay? Yeah, great. Okay, those are great ideas. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to follow 3-step directions, and I know you're all capable of this. So the first step, in a moment, I'm going to say the word please. Actually, I might say sesame. I'm going to ask you to say thank you to your partners for being your partners. And then 2 is, I'd like you to shift your attention to the next column, which is the transformational feedback. This is the language that Chris needs us as his capacity builders to speak. So when we engage in a conversation with him and we prompt him with a question or give him a reflective query just to kind of generate some reflective thought, these are examples and sentence stems that we might use. Okay, super handy. And then I want you to find a new partner, and the 2 of you get together and go through those and say, if I had an opportunity to sit down with Chris, after I slap him sideways a little bit, then what would I ask him to really generate some reflective thought to help him move along that continuum and help him engage his kids a little bit more intentionally? Fair enough? So would you please follow those 3-step directions? And I'll give you a couple minutes to look at that next column. Okay, team, so if you had the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with Chris, is there a prompt that you noticed that I would love to, at some point in the conversation, use this prompt and ask Chris this question? What would it be?
We went right to the tell
Yes,
me
ma'am.
more about the planning that went into today's lesson. Just right on the head.
Yeah,
Just share
tell me about the planning.
the second part of it. Why did you select the strategy you chose for this lesson?
Okay, so there's a 2-part question, and each part is essential, so you want to make sure that we implement both. Yeah, now we're starting to look at our next planning. So we had both, right? So you were talking about, tell me about the planning that went into today's lesson. And then guess what we do? Wait time. I'm telling you, friends, wait time is your best friend in this process. Because if you want your teacher to let you into their head and let them know what they're thinking, you've got to ask them to talk their way through it, because eventually they'll let you know what's actually going on. So tell me about the planning that went into today's lesson. And then as a follow-up, what was the second part?
Why did you select the strategy you chose for this lesson?
Yeah, why'd you pick this strategy? Because the assumption is, and we're letting Chris off the hook slightly, aren't we? The assumption is he picked the strategy on purpose. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but we're going to let him off the hook on this one. We're going to show him a little bit of grace. And then he's going to tell us, I picked this strategy because I thought this would happen, or I thought this would happen. And now you're in his head as far as what he's capable of reflecting. You start to understand this a little bit better. And then your next question is a great one too, which tell me about what your kids might be screwing up tomorrow, and what are you going to do about it in advance? So how are you going to plan that? Beautiful questions to really get him thinking about being intentional about what he's doing. Fantastic. What else? What's another one? And it's all about growth, it's all about progress, it's all about the next steps, right? Because how many times, and I can tell you in my own history, I've done this a ton, where we just stop at the first part. I observed this and the kids did that. That's not enough. That we need to ask a question, right? So tell us the question again.
How will you shift tomorrow's lesson to change the outcome?
Yes. What are you going to do differently tomorrow so the kids respond differently tomorrow? Really, again, coming back to that cause and effect, which will help him to see what's intentional. So the questions that you've got in this column on this page have a theme, and the theme is in the parenthetical subheading of that column. What's that say there?
Leading prompts.
Leading prompts, right? We want to lead the witness. You ever just watch a courtroom drama? At some point, objection, Your Honor, leading the witness. Well, that's exactly what we want to do with our teachers who are operating the conscious stage, because we know they know. We just got to get them to say it. Because if they say it, it's another level of commitment towards actually doing it, right? So that's what leading prompts are about. If you look at the, and I know you don't have it in front of you, the action stage, actually let's go backwards. The unaware stage, it's directive statements. And if you look at that column, there's not a single question mark at the end of that column. How crazy is that, right? Because why would you ask somebody a question if you know they don't know the answer? If you're unaware, I'm not going to ask you a question about it. I'm going to tell you what you need to do differently. I'm going to tell you what I noticed. I'm going to give you suggestions about how to change it. That's the only place in this continuum where we do telling. Everywhere else is asking. So with conscious stage, it's leading prompts. With action stage, it's open-ended prompts, because we've got a teacher that's in it to win it. We're just going to ask them questions, and then we're just going to walk away. And then with refinement stage teacher, it's challenging prompts to truly challenge their role in the school, truly challenge their role in the profession, truly challenge their thinking, to make sure they've thought it all the way through. Okay, so all those are very intentionally designed to connect. And what we found to be very useful, and I've used this model with hundreds of schools and districts across the country, is that we're going to have conversations with teachers anyway, right? So it may as well behoove us to know how they're reflecting on their practice, so we ask the question and phrase it the right way. And have you ever seen a teacher in a classroom say, oh, hold on, boys and girls, let me check the lesson plan. I want to make sure I do this right. Have you ever seen that? That's a great thing to do, right? Because you don't want to screw up a lesson. As capacity builders, if you're sitting down and having a conversation with a teacher, it's okay to say, hold on a second, I'm going to ask you a question, but I want to make sure I phrase it right, so let me consult with my Continuum of SelfReflection. I'll be right back with you. And then use this as a lesson plan format to make sure that you ask the questions the right way. I'm telling you, I can't tell you how many administrators in particular I've worked with who swear by this just because they want to phrase it right, right? Because we don't want to ask a question and have somebody respond defensively or angrily, or what do you mean? You want me to do the lesson again? Well, that's not what we're talking about. I just want to get in here a little bit. That's all. All right, do we have time for the last one? Oh, we do. Okay, 3-step direction is going to be real quick, and you're going to move to the last column. This is the coaching strategy. So if you had the opportunity to offer Chris a coaching strategy, what would you offer him? And stay with, actually, 2-step directions. Skip the whole part about finding a new partner. Just stay with the great person you're with. Dance with the girl you brung. That's the expression that I was raised with. So go through that last column together and see if there's a strategy or two that you might elicit for Chris. All right, team, let's bring it back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and all right. Okay, only because of time, I'm not going to ask you if there was a strategy that you thought might be an appropriate strategy to share with them. Thematically, I want you to acknowledge this when you go back and you look through the whole tool again later, that there are different coaching strategies on each page. So there are different ways that we coach teachers based on their reflective tendencies and their reflective habits. We're not going to blanket model lessons for every teacher. Some teachers need that, some teachers don't need that. Comes back to that first word I wanted you to pay attention to in our learning target, match. What we do has to match what our teachers are ready for and what they need. So if we can address the right coaching strategies, the right feedback prompts, the right way to partner teachers with each other, then we're much more likely to get them to grow reflectively. And remember this quote that I put up on the screen as our closing? If we haven't changed the way our teachers are thinking and reflecting on their practice, we haven't made any difference at all. Okay, we can change an action, it'll probably revert as soon as we walk away. If we can change the way somebody's thinking about something, I guarantee you the actions will follow. All right. Gosh, those sessions are fast. I want you to thank your partners for being your partners in that one. And thanks for coming to my session. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of the conference and a great rest of the afternoon. And if you're staying here to talk about performance concerns, then make yourself comfortable.